Okay, good afternoon. My name is Trina Shanks. I'm Director of Community Engagement for the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. We have a team that's called my Engage team that has been working to offer volunteer opportunities for the School of Social Work in the broader community. And that team includes Sonia Harb, Aisha Ghazi, Fatima Salman, and now we also have a MSW field student, Jamie Simmons, and Dominique Crump has been helping. We also do this in partnership with the Office of Field Education. And so Dan and his team has been helping with that. I'd like to say today we're really excited to have Sarah Teare, who works for Habitat for Humanity for Huron Valley. We also have two students, Chidimma Ozos and Justin Woods. And we're gonna just engage in a conversation about what people are doing in their communities, how's that informing your understanding of social work, and then we'll end with a period of self-care and then some closing reminders and announcements. I think I'd like to just say really quickly that we're in a pretty uncertain times. We don't know exactly what's going to happen over the next few months, but this Thursday call is an opportunity to stay informed about what at least some of the things that are happening in our local community and ways that we as a school can volunteer and be helpful and keep ourselves engaged. So that's really what these calls are about, and we're excited that you're joining us today. Next slide. So it is my pleasure to welcome Sarah Teare. She is Senior Director and Resident of Community Engagement for Habitat for Humanity in Huron Valley. And she's going to talk to us today about the work that Habitat for Humanity of Huron Valley has been doing in Ypsilanti, Washtenaw communities, and how you can help, because she's one of the volunteer opportunities that are on our volunteer list. So thank you for joining us today, Sarah, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be sharing with you the work that Habitat's been doing. If you can, one more slide, please. If you can go to the next, there we go. So I wanted to give you a little background on what Habitat does in community engagement or community organizing work, which is a little bit different than what a lot of people think when they hear about Habitat for Humanity. Most people know us for building homes and building houses and helping low-income home buyers access affordable home ownership. And that is our core mission. Then we still do that at the scale of 18 to 20 homes a year in Washtenaw County. But in 2013, we really started thinking in a broader scale and seeing how we were concentrating a lot of our builds in certain communities. We thought that it is a great idea to not only do one house at a time here and there, but also to lift up the entire neighborhood. So our community organizing work really focused that into areas where we're talking to the residents in the community, engaging with them, finding out what they like about their neighborhoods, what's going well, how can we work together to make those neighborhoods stronger. And so now we partner in 3 communities in Ypsilanti Township. All on the map there you can see Galt Village, Sugarbrook, and West Willow. They're all adjacent to each other, but they all have unique characteristics and unique opportunities that we're working on. Next slide, please. So in this arena since 2013, we've engaged with hundreds of residents in community input sessions. We've done door-to-door surveying out in the neighborhood. We've partnered with all kinds of social service agencies, community organizations, and engaged with residents. Again, the scope of this work is really to find out how can the community come together, hear what is important to the residents who live in those areas, and how then can we all work together to make communities stronger. So our approach is entirely resident driven. We do not go in and say, here's what we think you need to do, or here's what other people have said should be done in your neighborhood. It is all driven from the community, ground up, from the folks who live there, worship there, visit there, and work in those communities. So through these processes, we discover that a lot of communities have similar aspirations that they want to come together and work on collectively. Next slide, please. And they typically kind of fall into kind of 4 areas, and each area ends up developing projects that look different. So oftentimes the communities want to build better relationships with each other. So residents say, I want to know my neighbors better. I used to know who lived on my street. I don't anymore. I feel isolated. I don't have that connection that I, really would like to have in my community. Often they also want to create more of an identity for their neighborhood. So in these areas, we work with the communities on things such as social activities, so ice cream socials and block parties and neighborhood get-togethers, community picnics. We've helped out with a lot of signage. You can see the West Willow Neighborhood Association sign, and logos for community and resident-led action teams, such as the neighbor relations and the youth activities teams. Also, we often hear that amenities in the neighborhood could be improved, and amenities is a big idea. It means different things in different neighborhoods. Sometimes it's about helping communities get speed bumps put on streets. Sometimes it's building little free libraries in the community. Sometimes it's building a pavilion. Last fall, we finished a tool lending library in West Willow, so residents can now come and check out tools and borrow them for free. We always hear, there needs to be more for the kids to do. And so youth activities can look at things like building a youth council with the neighborhood, having family movie nights where everybody comes together and the kids pick the movies. We got a blow up screen and we can do them outdoors now, which is really a lot of fun. And then neighborhood beautification, simple things like park cleanups, cleaning out the storm drains in the neighborhood, all the way to, critical home repairs that families need new roofs, or a community center needs updating and refreshing. So when we're looking at these things, again, it's always because the neighborhood has said, this is what's important to us and this is what we want your help with. And our role is to convene people, to get them together, to give them a safe space to have those conversations where they can discuss these areas, to help them formulate action teams. We do a lot of mailers to the community. We help them access funding as far as grant writing is concerned. But just having kind of somebody there to be the support system for the residents who are already doing great things and may just, need to connect to other residents that are also wanting to do those great things with them. Next slide, please. So on the previous slide, there's lots of pictures of people together and hanging out and having fun and, being close to each other. Obviously, in this current era, we've had to adapt. How can we do things? What is important? What are the ways that COVID-19 has changed how we work in neighborhoods? And when I was thinking about this, putting this presentation together, I thought, it would be a lot of, this is the way it used to be, this is the way it is now. But when I really thought about it, to me, it was just that we're doing it a different way. The mission is still the same. The core aspects of what people want are still the same. We're just having to change how we deliver those services, or how we manage those expectations, or how we bring people together. It's still, the focus is on the people, the focus is on the community. And we're finding new partners that are stepping up, new relationships that are being formed, and new exciting resources that are coming online. So that's been really encouraging. Next slide, please. So some of the things that our partners in the neighborhood have done, and in some of these cases, they've been led by residents, and we've just kind of helped along the way. In other situations, we've been a little bit more involved in the forefront of the activity. So we started off pretty early on just saying, we know people need to just kind of be checked in on. So we've been calling a lot of residents in the neighborhood, just saying, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need? We can connect them with answers to questions or resources in their neighborhood, or in some cases, direct cash assistance. So that's been something that we've done pretty regularly since the beginning of the pandemic. We're supporting the neighborhood associations moving to Zoom conference for their neighborhood watch meetings. So everybody in the 3 communities we work in has a monthly neighborhood association or neighborhood watch meeting. And they didn't meet last month, and people were really feeling the loss of that connection, especially in this time. And so we worked with the township and the sheriff's office and the neighborhood coordinators. And they are going to be next week. Each community is going to have their Zoom meetings, which will be exciting. We also helped convert the little free library in the West Willow neighborhood from books to food. So back about 4 years ago, we put up 3 little free libraries here in West Willow, and that's where I am today, right now. And they have been really well used as book libraries. But we thought, what better way could we have a permanent site that's accessible to everybody in the community to come and get food? So we just pulled the books out, stocked it up. We've been refreshing it every week as Habitat, and then there's a couple community partners in the neighborhood who are checking on it more regularly. People are encouraged to donate food if they can to the site, and it's been very well received. This community, as well as Sugarbrook and Galt Village, all have really robust nextdoor.com or Facebook group sites. So there's been a lot of information shared that way. But we also recognize that there's a lot of people that don't have access to technology. And so we've been working with our community partners in creative ways in sharing information out. And that's where the phone calls come in a lot. Most everybody still has a phone, and we're able to reach them that way and spread information about resources. In the little free libraries, we're also putting kind of an information packet about things such as the upcoming testing site right in the Sugarbrook neighborhood. So as a lot of folks probably know, 48197, 48198 has been the community that's been hit the hardest with the COVID-19 pandemic. And there was a lot of concern that there wasn't testing available right in the neighborhoods. And so starting actually last week, there's a site in the city of Ypsi now, and then there's 2 pop-up sites that are going to be happening in Ypsi Township. One of them right in the Sugarbrook neighborhood at a very well-known community center. So we're sharing information about that in a lot of different ways, including what we're doing here today. So right now I'm in the West Willow neighborhood, and I'm on site at the neighborhood association, and they are a food distribution site for Ypsilanti Community Schools food every week on Thursdays. And then the sheriff's office comes also on Thursdays and is handing out cleaning supplies, sanitary supplies, and gloves and masks to residents. Anybody who comes, you don't have to be from West Willow. Anybody can come to the site and take those things with them. So in all those packets that or bags and things that we're handing out, we're also giving out information about the pop-up testing sites, about the food pantry, about just, how COVID-19 is spread, just to make people who may not be hearing that information in other ways kind of get that into their hands. We're also working with Growing Hope this year, and this is an annual thing that we do. So it's not just because of this pandemic, but it's really timely. A lot of folks are interested in growing their own food. And so we have a partnership with Growing Hope and Habitat and a donor of ours, a mutual donor who provides funding for raised garden beds for community members. And so we're going to be installing 6 new beds this year for 6 Habitat homeowners, and that'll bring our total up to over 30 that we've provided over the years. Next slide, please. So other things that we're doing, I mentioned the household distribution site that has been really, really popular over the last 3 weeks that it's been happening. The tool lending library that I mentioned before that we built last year is storing all this material. So it's really put West Willow as a hub in the community where the sheriff's office can bring this information on these pine sol and bleach and scrubbies and tampons and all kinds of great things that are being given out, but they'll have a central area that they can store them and package them. We're also collaborating on early phases of a partnership with a local church and the health department in Washtenaw County and a couple of U of M disciplines on an initiative in West Willow to keep people housed. So West Willow Neighborhood Association is a 501c3. They're their own nonprofit, and they receive some funding to really be able to give community members direct cash assistance to help them stay in their homes and pay their utility bills, as well as looking at ways to help community leaders become outreach kind of coordinators or captains for getting information out to other community members. So we're going to be training some community leaders up on Zoom and inviting them to invite their friends and neighbors in the neighborhood to get on those and share information. And while all this is going on, we are still, of course, looking at the future and talking with our community partners in West Willow, Sugarbrook, and Galt Village about, the next step. Nothing that we've wanted to do in the future has, is not still something that we want to do. So we're taking this time to reflect and have conversations about, we want to build a new community center here in West Willow. We still want to do that, but how's that going to look? How's that going to change in the landscape that we have now? All right, next slide. So we put together some ways that students can get involved. And before I talk about that, just wanted to briefly mention that at Habitat, obviously the community organizing work is one part of it, but we've also adapted some of our other areas based on the current climate, such as our education team, which provides financial education. They've gone totally to online classes and one-on-one financial counseling support. So those are free classes that anybody can take, and we're spreading the word about that. Our Restore, which is if you haven't been there before, it's on the west side of Ann Arbor. It's a resale shop that sells building materials, furniture, appliances, household goods. Obviously, they are shut down as a non-essential business right now, but they started online sales this week with pickup at the store. We have online and mail applications for our home improvement programs that are not operating right now, but will be in the future again. And then for our current homeowners who have been in their homes, so when you buy a Habitat home, the home buyer purchases that with a mortgage, just like anybody else, and they have to pay that mortgage back. A lot of our homeowners obviously have been affected by job loss, loss of overtime, additional family members living in their home now, increased expenses, and some are struggling to pay their mortgages. So we've created a mortgage payment relief program directly at Habitat that will be able to give them direct assistance. And then I'll talk about our program evaluation in just a minute on the next slide. So we have thought of, a lot of ways that students can help out. Calling residents in our partner neighborhoods is a pretty simple way. Just calling them, checking in, offering support, sharing some of that information that we have about COVID-19 safety. Let them know about the neighborhood watch meetings that are coming up on Zoom and how to connect. You can come out and volunteer like me here today in West Willow on Thursdays. There's all kinds of activities to do, from packaging supplies up, handing out food, tearing down boxes, moving equipment around. it's a fun time. We always, of course, need donations of masks, gloves, and non-perishable food items to put in the food pantry and or to give out directly to folks that we see need that. We have created an evaluation project that has been a long time coming. At Habitat, we haven't had a real formal way of asking residents who participate in our programs how we have done with that. And so with our current social work intern and some help from a psychology class last term at U of M, we've started putting questions together to really evaluate how we have been doing in delivering programming. And so we're at the stage now where we can use some help in actually asking residents who have participated in our programs those questions. So that's something we can have students helping with. We do have a one-time need just to create profile updates of our partner community neighborhoods. So demographic data, pulling census information, using GIS, just getting some kind of stats updated from our communities. And then easy things that you can do, just follow our Restore if you're on Facebook. If you see anything that you want to buy, of course, that would be awesome. And then, of course, we're always looking for monetary donations to support all of Habitat's missions. And just knowing what we do, sharing that information out with friends and family who may be in a place where they want to help out, or they may want to be a recipient of one of our programs, such as our housing program, or if they live in West Willow Community or Sugarbrook or Galt Village, we can be more involved with them in our community engagement work. Next slide. All right, so my contact information is on here. I'm happy to take some questions now, and I thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was great to hear all the amazing work that you're doing. So if anyone has any questions, if they could write it in the chat, and then we can unmute you. So it looks like Brianna has asked, is there telehealth for assessments? And Brianna, I can go ahead and unmute you if you want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I was actually looking for something that I could do that's helping communities with telehealth and running assessments for them, because that's something I was trained in. If there's anything like that that's available.
Not with Habitat necessarily, I don't know. And I'm not sure, I'm not 100% familiar with telehealth. I'm assuming it's more in a medical setting. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's any, like Growing or Hope Clinic or any of the other folks, if they've had any needs on your Engage program for telehealth, but that would be where I'd probably look first. And I can keep my ears out for something like that, but I've not heard of any organizations that are looking for that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Brianna, we do have the volunteer opportunities list, so check on there. And in a few weeks, we will be featuring a guest who's going to be talking a little bit about the telehealth that they're doing as well.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so stay tuned. Okay, so next, it looks like Chelsea Compton, you have a question, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Hey there, just curious, you might have said it, sorry if I missed it, but what time of day do you do the distributions on Thursdays?
So in West Willow on Thursdays, this week it was at 10, last week it was at 11. I can confirm what time I think they're gonna stay with the earlier time slot, but I can confirm that. Oh, hey, Joanne's right here. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Sarah.
Are you gonna?
Here?
This is the social work school.
Hi.
do you know if you're going to continue this at 10 o'clock?
It would be probably 10 o'clock.
Okay, that time was working better.
Yeah.
Okay.
And do we just email you, Sarah, if we want to do that? Okay.
Yep, you can just email me and I can let you know for sure and confirm the time. And yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, so now we also have a question from Trina.
Okay.
Yeah, I had tons of questions, but I'll just start with two. So do these neighborhood associations already exist, and you just joined in and started meeting and kind of gathering information from residents? Or did you actually have to create some of this synergy from scratch? And the second question is, are you working across all three communities, or are you kind of seeing them as each three separate entities?
Yeah, so in answer to your first question, in all of the three neighborhoods that we are working in now, they already did have neighborhood associations or neighborhood watch, which is a little bit different. West Willow has a functioning nonprofit and did before we came in. They actually invited us to the neighborhood after they saw how we had worked in the Galt Village community first. But when we start entering a neighborhood, our first thing that we do is go to those neighborhood association or neighborhood watch meetings, really just kind of introduce ourselves, talk to people, see if there is, acceptance of what we want to maybe partner with them on. It would be much harder if there wasn't kind of some base, already to kind of jump in with. But that being said, the neighborhood watch in Sugarbrook is, just a monthly meeting, and we started going to that and sharing with them what we had been working on. And so has grown. I think one of the things we like to help with is just growing participation at those events too. As far as kind of cross sectoring or bringing people together across all neighborhoods, yes. I mean, each community often has different needs or similar needs that take different shape in what they want the actual outcome activities to look like. So we will, pull references from other neighborhoods that we've been in and said, hey, this is what worked well over here, or bring speakers in from other communities. Like today here in West Willow, anybody can come to the distribution site. So we've cross-shared it over all the communities that we're working in and let them know that this is happening. But we do a lot of information sharing on the Nextdoor and social media sites, and those are not always exclusive to just community members who live in that neighborhood. So that naturally has created some, pollination of information across neighborhoods as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have now a question from Sonia Harb. So Sonia, if you want to go ahead and ask that question.
Sure. Sarah, I'm wondering, how does the community view your organization? As a partner, as a supporter? Is there some hesitancy or, mistrust? I'm just wondering about that. And to that end, it seems like you have a really strong, positive relationship with the community. How do you cultivate that? And what do you pay attention to in making sure that those relationships are positive?
Yes. I believe that the root of really being successful at this is always everything I do, I'm always checking it and making sure it's not Habitat or me imposing what I think should be done in the community. And so our trust comes from, I believe, people, I've heard them say it, we've had all these organizations come in, they just want to do a study, they just want to research us, and then they're gone. Or they come in and say, here's what we think you should do, and they haven't even talked to any community members. So our approach of just being there for a good year minimum of talking with people, getting to know the neighborhood, walking the streets, knocking on doors, being at every event possible. I think that's what helps build that trust up first and foremost. And then always leading the conversations with, okay, this sounds like something you guys are really passionate about. How can we help? And not, oh, I heard about this cool thing. I think we should do that. And so the trust for me, I feel really comes from that position of, not pushing our agenda on anybody. We're first and foremost a convener, an organizer, and a supporter of the residents and their desires and their hopes and aspirations and their dreams for their community. We just hope that we can help them kind of pull it together and package it and maybe smooth out the process along the way. And there's always ups and downs, and people drop out and more people come in, and change of leadership and pandemics. So another key thing that I always tell folks is we're here for the long haul. We're here for as long as you need us. We're here until you tell us we got this on our own. And so our role has changed over time in the communities from kind of less originally. A lot of times we're having to do a lot more of the legwork and maybe put together an event or be a lot more involved in planning something. And now in one of the neighborhoods, we really kind of just get invited to things, and the community is doing the work more, from their standpoint. And that's our goal eventually, is just kind of to phase out and to be an invitee and a partner that they feel they want to have around at things, in partnership with them, but not, if there's a day where I don't have to be, needed as much, that's great. That means the community has thrived and those leaders have really stepped up, and they have, made that transition to being comfortable and confident and, in charge of taking things to the next level. And that's what we hope for.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Okay, so now we have a question from Mary H. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for taking time to share what you all are up to. It's nice to see so many faces. My question's a little abstract and might not make a lot of sense because I'm just trying to wrap my head around what I'm actually trying to ask. But I'm just curious. I saw on the website that the global village and the international work has been totally postponed through the rest of the year.
Yep.
Just curious, as we are in a situation where we all feel kind of distant in a lot of ways, but also very connected in many other ways, has there been any sort of talks about how to continue those relationships so that those potential, communities that maybe people were going to go out to work with are feeling supported, and potentially a Zoom meeting if internet permits, or fundraising of some sort? Is there any sort of project or conversation related to that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And so Global Village is Habitat International's volunteer arm, international volunteering arm. And so a lot of affiliates choose a partner community that they will go to year after year. And in our case, we have a partner relationship with a city called Quetzaltenango, which is in Guatemala. So we've been going there for the last 7 years, and I've gone for 6 years, twice as trip leader, and our strength and our partnership and our commitment is to that city and that community in Guatemala. So while we haven't necessarily, I haven't thought about it, and I like your point about, is there something more specific we can do in this time to support them? We continually support them every single year with funds that we send to them. And we'll continue to do that regardless of whether or not we can send physical people over there to do volunteer work. But we're in touch a lot with the leadership in the Guatemala affiliates. And so we do a lot of checking in with them just on how things are going. We also stay in contact through Facebook with all of our families that we've built for over the past 7 years. So we're chatting with them and sending pictures and things back and forth and checking up on them. But, this gives me an idea of, could we do some kind of a special monetary ask and, send additional funds to them in this time, because I know they're definitely in lockdown and in need of support as well as folks are here. So that's a good idea. All right. I think that's our last question. So
I actually have a question.
Sorry.
Because I did, some work with you guys before.
Yeah.
I know what amazing work the residents do. I was wondering if you could share just some examples, some successes of the resident-led advocacy and what it's accomplished.
Yeah. So we've done a lot in Sugarbrook, which is where Aisha's students have helped out over the past a couple years. And in that community, the residents have formed some pretty strong action teams that are carrying activities forward. So they have a neighbor relations action team that has planned and pulled off some successful social events. So they did the holiday party, they did Halloween trunk or treat, they've done a summer bash, which was almost 400 people came out from the community to a ice cream and bouncy house music festival in the neighborhood at the park. And that was all under the idea of, folks wanting to know their neighbors and their community more. So bringing people together. That team is still working on actions. They are helping out with the similar to what we're doing here in West Willow. They did a distribution in Sugarbrook, giving out supplies. They're talking about converting one of their food pantry or book pantries over to food. So that team's been really instrumental and successful in getting folks together. They also have a amenities team, which has changed its name to Community Enhancements. And so that neighborhood team is working on a petition to get speed calming measures, which might be speed bumps or some other method of slowing down traffic on some of the streets in the community. So that's been something that they've been working on, and it's in the process. It just has to go through the necessary steps. The youth activities team in that community last year they did 3 movie nights. So that was really successful for parents to come out and be able to give their kids some time to just run around and watch movies and eat popcorn and pizza. And while the parents had a little break from the kids, that was really something that people found helpful and exciting.
Okay, so then last question is from Trina. How many Habitat homes are across these 3 communities, and is there a goal for each year?
So in total, I would say we have 60 houses in those 3 neighborhoods altogether. There isn't necessarily a number goal per year because it really depends on availability of property that we can purchase. So we're always looking for buying homes in those 3 neighborhoods. And with the housing market having gone, back up recently, who knows what'll happen here now. Housing is becoming more expensive to purchase, of course, and so we're always talking with landlords who may want to get out of the landlord business, or families who unfortunately have a family member pass away and may not want to keep that house in the community because they don't have a need for it. So, and we also work with the township if they get the properties back through some of their tax foreclosure methods, we have relationships where we can help out and purchase those and rehab them. Our goal for the overall county-wide has been 15 to 18 homes, but not all of those homes are in our 3 partner neighborhoods just because of the availability of housing. But we're always trying to find additional houses in these 3 neighborhoods if they're available.
Okay, Sarah, I want to thank you so much again for joining us and sharing your amazing work. And everyone on the call, I want to remind you that Sarah's information is on the slide, and you can also head on over to the volunteer opportunity list, which is connected to the School of Social Work's homepage, and Habitat's volunteer opportunities are listed there. So thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to hand it over now to Trina, who's going to introduce a student who's joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Aisha. Just for those who are on the line to know that what we're hoping these Thursday calls will be a chance to have a conversation. So today we've invited 2 students to share what they've been doing in volunteering in the community and just some things that they've been involved with, just provide some examples. And then if you have things you're doing and you'd like to share in the future, just email our team and we will make that opportunity available. But for today, next slide, Fatima. So for today, I have the pleasure of introducing Chidimma Ozos, and she's going to speak for a little bit about what she's been doing in the community. She is a MSW MicroMaster student, a Global Activities Program Scholar, and she has an interpersonal practice concentration with the health practice area. So I'm going to turn it over to Chidimma, and we look forward to hearing what you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Trina, and thank you, Jamie, for inviting me to share what I've been up to over the academic year and specifically around COVID-19. So I just want to take a moment because this is part of the work that I do. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that certainly within the last 24 hours, there's been loss of life. Sean Reed was murdered at the hands of Indianapolis Police Department. And then February 23rd, a young man who would have been turning 26 tomorrow, Ahmaud Arbery, he was murdered by 2 white vigilante thugs. And so I want to take a moment to ground myself and to consider that I have the privilege and honor to be here, and these young men do not. So thank you again, Jamie, for inviting me to share what I've been doing. And so for me, as a student, I believe that I've had an opportunity to utilize my space and my platform in ways that perhaps I would not have been able to do in other spaces, in other colleges or schools around the University of Michigan campus, perhaps at other institutions. And when my plans, like so many others, shifted as a result of COVID-19, I sprung into action. I've been a yoga teacher and practitioner for over 10 years. I've been teaching meditation during that time as well. And I thought, as a social worker, how do I pivot? And if we're not able to pivot, then can we really expect anyone else to be able to pivot, really? Because if anyone's going to be able to do this, it's going to be social workers, right? We have a code of ethics, not only with the NASW, but also the International Federation of Social Work. We have a global definition of social work. And so this is our platform. This is an opportunity. This is a time for us to rise up and come alongside folks in these unprecedented times. And that's how I started doing work on my own, free of charge in terms of grounding events. And then I also had to take some time away from that because I strongly believe in soul care for me and self-care. And so as a student that also was teaching last semester, I was a graduate student instructor within the school Department of Sociology, and teaching really heavy stuff and having to transition that along with my own learning to online, teaching to online. I needed to really take care of myself in a holistic way and do what I could, and also not do what wasn't for me to do. And from there, one of the ideas that I thought of, and I thankfully don't do my life alone. I have folks in my circle that I collaborate with, that I do life with. And so one of them is actually is our next speaker, Justin Woods. And another one is Alicia Sutton. And so we collaborated and thought about Schools in Session, an educational series that is actually pods intensive. So we talk about pods a lot. And from my own lived experience, I haven't experienced pods except for in maybe 2 classes since I've been a student since September 2019. And we thought, what if we actually do this, you know? And so we had 3 different conversations over the course of 3 weeks, and we are continuing through the summer as just an opportunity for students to dialogue and to talk about some kind of thorny discussion points or topics because we need to. You know, I think one of the things that comes up when we're talking about perhaps anti-racism or anti-oppressive social work practice, it tends to be, well, folks aren't there yet. Well, we might have to drag people. We might have to bring them alongside with us so that water seeks its own level. And I know that it can feel some may feel stifled, some may feel like they don't know where to start or don't know where to begin. And some may be like deers in headlights. And I get that. I have not always spoken up. I have since I was young, and I probably stopped for a long period of time. And it wasn't until 4 years ago with that circus of an election cycle that I started to cultivate my own voice. And for me, my encouragement to anyone, really, not just students, if you are invited to speak somewhere, if you are invited to connect with others on the work that you're doing, my encouragement is to take those opportunities and remain true to who you are. Some may not take this time to pause for a moment of silence. I did because that's who I am, and it's consistent with empathy, compassion, and understanding, my personal and professional tenets. You know, I was one of the student speakers for commencement for spring 2020 for the School of Social Work. And I utilized that opportunity to encourage my colleagues and anyone listening to do better, because there are ways that we each can do our part, whatever our part is, right? There's not an expectation. I can't do everything. That said, I can definitely do something. And so I am willing to do the something that has my name on it and inquire about some of the things that perhaps don't have my name on it that maybe I need to learn and do better in myself, you know, or come alongside other folks so that I'm passing the proverbial mic to them, because it's not about me speaking for someone else. It's simply about me coming alongside people and passing the mic over, because that's where I experience or enjoy privilege, whereas that's an area in which someone else experiences or experiences oppression, and vice versa. So my heart is heavy, if I'm honest, right now because of what's going on around us, and a seeming silence and complicity with people who have been charged to do this work with Justin and myself. And also, I do feel a great deal of hope as well, because there are people that are seeing things that need to get done, and they are saying, not on my watch, and they're rolling up their sleeves and they're doing what is their race. They're doing what is their own work, you know, to contribute to the collective work, the community work that we each are doing. So I'm not even sure, Jamie, that I answered the call that said these are some of the projects that I'm working on. The other thing that I utilize my social media presence as a space of education, and that is really important to me. And so if you go to my page, I've curated it in such a way that one of the common threads is schools in session. And so I highlight areas for us to devote our attention. And I do believe Google is our friend, at least as a starting point. Not everyone has access to the University of Michigan library, whether online or in person. That said, Google can be a great starting point in terms of doing our own work and doing research so that we can add value to a conversation in a meaningful way. And I say that more for folks that perhaps are not marginalized, and less for folks that are marginalized, because the onus is on the person that is not marginalized to contribute meaningfully and to listen and learn, less so than the person who's marginalized, certainly not to add more emotional labor to that person in terms of explaining something to someone else. So I think that's it. I don't even think I'm going to need to use all my time. So perhaps we can keep it moving.
Thank you so much, Chidimma, for sharing that. I think everything that you shared is so important. I want to open it up to any questions. Again, if you have anything that you'd like to share, please type it in the chat or ask Chidimma, and then I will unmute you. Sonia has asked if you have the link to your page, if you could share that with us after, and then we can make sure to include it in materials of this call, and we'll send it out to everyone.
Absolutely.
So Jamie, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Chidimma. Thank you so much for joining us today. The question I had is, how have you been using your beliefs and your push for holistic practices in your field placement and in the School of Social Work? I see a lot of the things that you do on your Facebook page that you really try to bring the School of Social Work and a lot of the students that are part of our program into your conversations. And I would really like you to talk about that and like the opportunities you have pushed for in your field placement.
Sure. So prior to coming to the School of Social Work, starting my professional degree in September 2019, I was a social science researcher. I am a lot older than I look. I already have a master's degree from a million years ago, and I was a social science researcher right down the street. And so one of the things that's really important to me, and sadly, I think it is sort of rooted, and so I'm doing my own work and I'm actually processing out loud as well because this is who I am, is I believe I was designed to dismantle many things. So racism is one, white supremacy is another, decolonizing academia is another one. And so part of this, and it's a double-edged sword, I rarely speak on something unless I know that data supports what I'm saying. So in common nomenclature, it may be I have the receipts. So what I do know is that Black, Indigenous, students of color are disproportionately affected by mental health compared to their white counterparts. And they are less likely, I'm actually this summer working on an equity grant that will be open to Black, Indigenous students of color for them to participate and implement wellness activities for their student groups. And they're less likely to get help. And so that is not dissimilar from the general population in terms of Black, Indigenous folks of color getting mental health support, resources, therapeutic services, et cetera, compared to their white counterparts. So one of the things that I do, because I do wellness coaching in my field placement, I pushed for wellness coaching specifically for Black, Indigenous students of color. And how I was able to do that was at the time when we were still living our best lives as we were prior to COVID-19, I was doing wellness coaching on Thursday evenings at Trotter Multicultural Center. And that was really, really important to me. And so thankfully, so some context, where I used to work here at the University of Michigan was very racist, very toxic, and employed white supremacist culture. That's a fact. It's not conjecture, it's a fact. So where I landed at my field placement, thankfully, has been a very healing solve for me. Even though the professional staff is all white, it has been healing insofar as they have been willing to do their own work and they are open to feedback from me. They do not treat me as a student intern. They treat me as a colleague. And they understand that when I'm talking about lived experience, also supported by the data, it's important to listen and to hear what I'm saying and to work with me so that we can serve students in the best possible way. So that is one of the ways, Jamie, that I have pushed in terms of knowing what the data says, right? And also knowing what I needed as an undergrad here that I didn't get. And so it's not about me per se, and yet it's not about me. And so I want to show up, especially for Black, Indigenous students of color, like undergrads and graduate students, because we are under a great deal of pressure and we experience generational trauma. And there's just so many other things that many of us are contending with, along with the layerings of our social identities that white students or colleagues are not. And so that was one way that I really pushed for. Another thing that I'm working on this summer is specific social media posts and captions for posts and images that are related to health and wellness, because health and wellness also is a subjective thing. It looks different in different communities. And so ensuring that because representation matters, and folks seeing people that look like them in social media, on TV and movies, etc. It's why Black Panther was a record breaker across the board. I don't do Marvel movies except for that one. And sometimes I wish I could go to Wakanda and live there because of what's going on around me, right? That would be very healing. That said, that's not an option yet. So what can I do to show up and support folks that look like me and that have similar experiences? Bearing in mind, Black folks in particular are not a monolith. You know, Indigenous folks are not, folks of color are not, et cetera, right? So what can I do with the power, privilege, and positionality is up to me to do.
That's great. Thank you. Trina, it looks like you also have a question.
Well, I put it in, but I can say it. As all of us are thinking about how we want to continue to move forward, do you have ideas about how either the engaged portion of the School of Social Work or the School of Social Work as a whole might be able to respond better to the current context, but particularly as we move from kind of emergency response to preparing for upcoming semesters? I know you've written some things before, but I just wanted to kind of have that conversation here for a little bit before we move on.
Sure. So I think one of the things, what's interesting is I have an email in draft. I like to draft emails and let them sit and marinate, because there's no way to unring a bell. So if I send something in haste, it's out there, right? And I want to make sure. That said, I don't tone police anyone else. this is what Chidimma Ozor does. I am not going to, go for Trina and say, oh, you shouldn't do, nope, unless Trina comes to me and asks me a question. So what I like to do, like I said, is I draft an email. So one of the emails that actually you all you're going to be privy to, there's an email circulating right now about an I think it's an anti-hatred or anti-something task force supporting Asian Pacific Islander. I want to include everyone does the American, groups of students that are of Asian descent, right? Because we've seen an increase in hatred and racism towards these folks as a result of COVID-19. And so what I want to challenge us as a school is to talk about the anti-Black racism that is happening within our school and beyond our school so that those students also feel supported. And this is different than an all lives matter type of situation where folks are, I wouldn't go to a breast cancer awareness walk and talk about all cancers matter. That is inappropriate and it doesn't even make any sense. What I want us to do is to actually have these conversations. So I am a disruptive storyteller. I talk about things that are sometimes difficult for us to talk about, and that's okay. I think that's one of the things that I was created to do on this planet. So let's talk about these things.
I feel like as an intern or an entry-level worker or, somebody who's just started at an organization, I know in my last field placement, I felt I was seeing discrimination happen towards one of my Black colleagues, and I wouldn't even know where to begin in terms of starting a conversation with management or coworkers about that. I just didn't know if anyone had ideas about that.
Sure. So I want to also call out one privilege that I enjoy. So like I said, I got a first master's a long time ago. So I am around the same age as some of my instructors, certainly older than some of them, certainly younger than some of them. And the same is true for the folks I work with at my field placement. So as a result of that, the last day that I worked full-time at the university was one of the best days of my life, August 23rd, 2019, because of the conditions in which I worked. I was just colleagues with them, right? So that was to my advantage. So I do want to express that to folks that are listening that may be younger than me, because I can certainly appreciate and understand that I may call things out in a way that other folks may not feel comfortable calling out because there is such a huge, perhaps age gap or like other gaps, right? Education, like in terms of formal education, et cetera. So one of the things that I like to do is I don't just go in calling stuff out. I like to take stock and inventory. A store that doesn't take inventory of what they have will go broke. I started a business with Alicia Sutton last semester, and I know exactly how many t-shirts we have because I need to know, right? And that is where I like to start. So I like to kind of see the lay of the land and take a look at and process what I'm experiencing. I also have a trusted closed mouth circle of people in my life. Some folks within the School of Social Work, very few folks within the School of Social Work, and then other folks outside of the School of Social Work, so I can bounce ideas off of them.